He rose from nothing to command an empire, conquered most of Europe, and redefined the very meaning of power. But his story is one of incredible ambition, grand victories, and a tragic downfall. This is the rise and fall of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte. The name alone conjures images of battlefield glory, strategy, and perhaps the most audacious ambition the world has ever seen. He was a man who changed the course of history. But who was Napoleon, really? And how did this brilliant strategist, born to humble beginnings, rise to control much of Europe? Born on August 15, 1769, on the island of Corsica, Napoleon wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. His family were Italian nobility, but in the grand scheme of Europe, they were far from powerful. Corsica, only recently ceded to France, was a place where power struggles were a part of daily life. At just 9 years old, Napoleon left Corsica to attend military school in mainland France. Imagine being a young Corsican, surrounded by French aristocrats who looked down on you. You could almost feel the hunger in him, the desire to prove everyone wrong. At the French military academy in Brienne, Napoleon wasn't exactly popular. He had a thick Corsican accent, was small in stature, and often felt like an outsider. But what set him apart was his incredible mind, sharp, disciplined, and focused. He learned military strategy like others learn math, and his attention to detail made him stand out. Now in the late 1700s, France was a nation on the brink of collapse. The French Revolution was tearing through the country like a wildfire. The monarchy was overthrown, and chaos ruled the streets. Amid this turmoil, Napoleon saw an opportunity. At just 24, Napoleon was already a captain in the French army. He knew this revolution was his chance to rise. His first real break came in 1793, during the siege of Toulon. The revolutionaries were facing a royalist uprising, and Napoleon was tasked with leading the defense. It was a risky move, but Napoleon's strategic brilliance shone through. He suggested a daring plan, one that involved placing cannons in positions no one had thought of before. And guess what? It worked. The royalists were defeated, and Napoleon was promoted. Just like that, a new star was born. By 1796, Napoleon was given command of the French army in Italy. Now, Italy wasn't exactly a unified country back then. It was a patchwork of kingdoms and city-states. But Napoleon, well, he had a gift for turning chaos into victory. In a series of brilliant campaigns, he outmaneuvered his enemies with speed, precision, and an almost supernatural understanding of battlefield tactics. The Austrians, who controlled much of Italy at the time, had no idea what hit them. By the end of 1797, Napoleon had not only conquered most of Italy, but had forced the Austrians to sign peace treaties. He was a national hero, a legend in the making, and the world was starting to take notice. But as we know, even the brightest stars blurred out. In 1798, Napoleon turned his gaze to Egypt. Egypt wasn't just a military target. It was also about securing France's position in the east. But things didn't go exactly as planned. At first, things seemed to be going well. Napoleon won the Battle of the Pyramids, an iconic moment in military history. But then came the harsh desert, disease, and most importantly, the British Navy. In a devastating blow, the British Navy, led by Admiral reshaped, destroyed Napoleon's fleet at the Battle of the Bulge. Napoleon was stranded in Egypt, far from home, and his dream of conquering the East was dashed. But Napoleon was never one to let failure lead him dead. While he was stuck in Egypt, political chaos was brewing back home in France. The revolution had led to a new government, the Directory, but it was weak, disorganized, and increasingly unpopular. Napoleon, ever the opportunist, saw his moment. In 1799, he staged a coup and overthrew the Directory. He wasn't just some general. He was now the leader of France. In a way, it was almost like a political chess move. The revolution was still fresh, but Napoleon knew how to play the game. Now in control, Napoleon wasted no time in transforming France. He introduced reforms, codified laws, and centralized the government. But perhaps his most lasting achievement was the Napoleonic Code, a set of civil laws that still influences legal systems around the world today. Under Napoleon, France became a modern state, and he made himself an emperor in 1804. But here's the thing about Napoleon. He was never content constant skirmishes wore them down. By the time Napoleon reached Moscow, the city was in flames and he had no choice but to retreat. Of the 600,000 men who started the campaign, only a fraction made it back. It was a devastating blow, a blow that marked the beginning of the end for Napoleon. The years following the Russian disaster were filled with defeat. The Allies, Britain, Russia, Austria, and Prussia, closed in on Napoleon. In 1814, after the Battle of Leipzig, Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the island of Elba. But Napoleon wasn't done yet. In 1815, he escaped Elba, returned to France, and reignited his legend for one last, brief moment. His final stand, known as the 100 Days, ended with his crushing defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. This time, it was over. Napoleon was exiled once again, this time to the remote island of Saint Helena in the South Atlantic, where he would die in 1821 at the age of 51. Napoleon Bonaparte's rise and fall is a story of greatness and tragedy. He was a man who reshaped the world, leaving behind a legacy of law, military genius, and, perhaps most importantly, the reminder that ambition can be both a gift and a curse. His name lives on in history books, but his life serves as a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that no matter how high we rise, the fall can be just as dramatic. Napoleon Bonaparte, a legend of his time, and a legend that endures to this day. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most fascinating figures, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of Napoleon's legacy? Is he a hero or a villain? Let's talk about it.